The Subhuman Race era of Skid Row's career is somewhat of an enigma. Out of the original 3 albums, in terms of its sound, atmosphere and overall aesthetic, it feels like the odd one out. Even the band themselves look a little different at this time. Gone are their feminine good look poses and rock and roll clothing of a declining genre. Gone is that sense of youth gone wild familiarity and rebellion. And gone is that signature sound that they are known for. In its place is this 13 track beast of an album called Subhuman Race, fronted by a band that have seemingly matured. Back when I first got my hands on this album, I immediately wrote it off saying things like, "Oh no, they sold themselves out. This isn't Skid Row. What is this? Why do they sound like that?" I even went as far as to say that it sounded disingenuous compared to their back catalogue. It's not true. I wasn't a fan of this album. Not at first, because I think in my mind I was expecting it to be another more intense version of what Slave to the Grind was, and the fact that it didn't measure up at that young age, it felt like a betrayal to the genre. Much like Guns N' Roses and their album Spaghetti Incident, I had sat on it. I held off listening to it so that I'd have something new to look forward to, because when was Skid Row or Guns N' Roses ever going to release something new, right? When was I going to hear another back Skid Row album? So it's safe to say, the first time I listened to this, it didn't meet my expectations. Instead, I got something wildly different. What I got was something I probably wasn't mature enough to appreciate. But as I've gotten older, something I didn't expect happened. Subhuman Race grew on me. And through the lens of the person I am today, I almost appreciate it more so than Slave or the first album for that matter. Time and time again, I have found myself returning to this album at different points in my life, and every time gaining a better appreciation for it. I long to understand its complexities, the meaning of the lyrics in the songs, and why they chose to go down this particular path musically. It all fascinates me, and on its 30th anniversary, I want it to fascinate you too. Another fascinating thing about this moment in their career is that it is essentially the beginning of the end of what most people would consider the real Skid Row. It was also the peak of everything new. There were so many things, so many changes happening, not only in music but in popular culture in general, that made the years 1995 to 1996 a very difficult time to be a band called Skid Row. The Subhuman Beings on tour was a train wreck that's hard to watch but at the same time hard to turn away from, and while there was certainly some memorable and no doubt successful shows, there was a lot of not so good shows as well, as we'll get into. In this documentary, I want to focus in more on this era and share my thoughts and opinions on all things Subhuman Race, and hopefully by the end come away with a better, more complete understanding of these songs and this time period, and in turn give you, my would-be viewer, a reason to take it out and listen to it all over again. If you've never heard it before, I want to give you a reason to listen to it. If you listened to it the first time and hated it, I want to change your mind. But before we jump into it, if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel and leave me a comment. This will all help to boost this video in the algorithm and help it to reach all the other subhuman beings out there. And with that said, let's jump in. Coming off the back of a #1 charting album like Slave to the Grind, I can only imagine the immense pressure they all must have felt. When all was said and done, despite all of the touring and album sales that they had achieved, not one person came away a rich man. The fact is, they all got screwed by the people that were supposed to be looking after them. From Sebastian's perspective, he had bills, a home and a family to take care of, so their next album needed to be a success. It needed to resonate. It needed to be loved. The pressure to replicate the success they had with Slave to the Grind was on, and so in October of '94, the boys went into the studio to record Subhuman Race. For this album, a different producer was brought in. Instead of going with Michael Wagner like they did for Slave to the Grind, they hired a man named Bob Rock. Bob Rock is a big name in the industry who's worked with everyone from the likes of The Cult to Metallica to The Offspring to even more recent acts like Black Veil Brides. The album was recorded in Vancouver, Canada in a place called Greenhouse Studios, better known today as Blue Light Studios. This yellow brick building and the place beside it in this unassuming laneway is where it all went down. It probably looked a little different back in the day, but this was the place, man. This was the place that Skid Row perfected their new alternative sound for the album that would become Subhuman Race, and that's what this album is. I've heard people label it a grunge album, but this isn't a grunge album at all, at least not to my ears. For me, grunge has a very distinct sound to it. So does alternative, and while the two genres share elements with one another, they aren't exactly the same. Similar to thrash and glam metal, it's on a spectrum. The two are similar but have characteristics that set them apart. Here's an example. Nirvana doesn't sound like Soul Collective, Alice in Chains doesn't sound like Sponge, and Skid Row in the 90s doesn't exactly sound like they're from the realms of Smelling Like Teen Spirit. No, it's something else. So when I see my contemporaries make that statement that Skid Row went grunge, I don't agree. For me, Subhuman Race sounds like it sits in the realms of alternative along with the likes of Soul Collective, The Screaming Trees or Freak Kitchen. It's an alternative album. As to why they chose to go down this alternative road instead of releasing another hard rock and slave to the grind type album, my educated guess is that there was just too much at stake to get this next release wrong. I think everyone must have taken the time to check out everything that was going on in music. Maybe that new angsty sound and everything that was going on resonated with them and put them into that necessary headspace. Maybe they thought that this sound was also reflective of what their fans and their future fans were expecting. Maybe this new alternative genre fit with how they were feeling. Maybe the label put pressure on them. Whatever the reason, Skid Row had to move in the most logical direction it saw fit to ensure its survival. For the longest time, I thought that they should have stuck to their 91 era sound, as that sound struck the perfect balance of hair metal blending it with their heavy metal hard rock sound. But would that sound have seen them through the decades successfully? I don't think so. It didn't work for Cinderella, nor did it work for Firehouse, so why would it have worked for Skid Row? Regardless of whether or not it would have sounded better to my ear, being labelled a hair metal band after 92, that was the mark of death. But honestly, I'm glad they went in this direction because what we got was something special. They went all in and delivered us this amazing album. They showed us their versatility as artists, but they also showed us that they were human. The journey ahead, it's a strange one. It's one that puts personal struggle and mental health at its forefront. And as a man in my 30s that sometimes struggles with his mental health, this album feels like a guide of sorts. The first thing you'll notice when you pick up this album is the new roaring red straight font logo in all caps with a faint stencil of the older logo laid on top, which I think signifies change. Everything from its blue background to its font choices is designed perfectly to draw your attention to it, and while it isn't the prettiest looking thing on the shelf, it refuses to be ignored. From a marketing standpoint, it's perfect and well thought out. Everything about it compels you to ignore everything else on the shelf to pick it up. The font choice for the album's title is also something I find interesting. The S and the R is in lowercase, as if the Subhuman Race aren't even worthy of a capital letter. Flipping the album over to the other side and we see the names of the tracks on the album. The tracks aren't written, but etched onto the page, as if carved in by stone, like a form of ancient Irish ogham, by a man who's possibly enslaved and treated like he's subhuman. The artwork in the gatefold almost looks like a part 2 to Slave to the Grind. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the other side of the same coin. A different perspective perhaps. The artwork for me conveys a sense of fear, dread and foreboding, like something even worse is about to happen to these people. There's a demon-like figure threatening to strike these mere mortals, but if only they knew, if only they had the courage to stand together, they could in fact overpower him. But this is the Subhuman Race, and another portrait done by Sebastian's father. The album credits reveal photographs of the band members along with various images that I think connect to the songs on the album. Symbolism is at the forefront and I love it. For me personally though, one of the most interesting finds about this album is that some versions came with a form to join the Skidrow fan club called the Chain Gang. If you became a member of the Chain Gang, it offered premium services to fans like exclusive tickets and access to Skidrow gigs, and also exclusive access to the Skidrow hotline, which in my head I picture being similar to that game Dream Phone. I mean, you can imagine it, right? It's late in the evening and all the horny teens and confused boys across America are ringing that number and being charged up the hole just to hear Sebastian read what's on the back of a shampoo bottle while he takes a dump. There was also exclusive Chain Gang merchandise. I wonder if it still exists. I wonder what would happen if I printed out this form and tried to join it in the year 2025. I feel that to truly understand this album, it needs to be listened to in its entirety and in a place where you can truly unwind, as it's packed to the brim with meanings, metaphors and nuance that you otherwise may not catch or have the means to truly appreciate on your commute to work, college, school or while scrolling reels on TikTok. So if this is your first time listening to it, I suggest giving this album the time it deserves. Put the phone away, pour yourself a drink and find somewhere quiet and comfortable before pressing play. Perhaps it is best listened to during the autumn and winter months, as this isn't a happy summertime album. The overall tone of this album is dark, cold and somber because Subhuman Race takes us down a darker road, an alternative road, the last place we would picture a band like Skid Row choosing to walk, but there they are and here we are along with them for that journey. This album is not for the weak-minded or faint of heart, nor is it for the casual listener expecting to hear their previous work. This is a different animal. Like I mentioned in the intro, when I first heard it, I immediately wrote it off. Skid Row sold out, man. Why did they do this? But I couldn't have been more wrong. The fact is, my naive, younger self simply didn't have the ability to process these set of stories that have been carefully laid out for me. I didn't have the intelligence or the maturity to look or want to look beyond what would eventually become a guiding hand throughout my adulthood, and even now. I needed to live a little and then come back to it. And as I mentioned, Subhuman Race is a journey about and through mental health and the challenges that life brings. Through the lens of the person I am today, in my personal opinion, the album is great and I stand by it. And as I got older, it grew on me. And each time I returned, I found myself relating and understanding these songs that little bit more. I will attempt to explain to the best of my ability what they mean to me and what I picture in my head when I hear them. Keep in mind, this is just what I interpret. Whether or not it makes sense, I'll leave that up to you. So My Enemy, what's it all about? Is it about betrayal? Is it about a coward who doesn't say what he truly means, or both? Or is it just about war in general? Whatever it is, I love it. The music video is simple yet effective. The band are shot in black and white, and in such a way that makes Sebastian look almost demonic. The anger is conveyed visually. We also see a strange looking character in a gas mask and another eating money. It's a puzzle, and I love it. I love the pounding drums, I love the alternative guitar tone, and I love the vocals. Rob hits the skins as if he's in the fight of his life. Each impact sounding like a punch, like a blow to the head of whoever this enemy is, and Sebastian leads the charge, but instead of a soaring vocal to bring the song to the surface, Sebastian does it with a roar. Fleshing out the rest of the song, Scotty, Snake and Rachel play with a new unique sound they didn't have on the previous albums. All the elements combined really set the tone for the album. No, the journey that's ahead of us. This isn't fun and games, this isn't even rebellion, it's mental health, it's a battle from within, and you'll see what I mean by that when you listen to the next track, Fire Sign. Fire Sign takes us inside the mind of somebody who's stuck in his own head, torturing himself with the memories of yesterday. These lyrics in particular stand out to me. As sailing ships pass through my mind, I pass wreckage on the way. Glory seekers fall in line getting closer. On a carousel through my yesterdays. Brotherhood of betrayal. Sabotage to no avail. Beaten. Burned, I'll take the fall and get upright in your face. Walk all over what I believe, but I'm still here. You'll disappear without a trace. Sabotaged, betrayed by his friends, stuck in the past, constantly replaying the memories of yesterday and how it all could have been if only he had done it differently. I know I've been there. Glory seekers fall in line getting closer. Backstabbers playing the game until they get close enough to take what they want from you. But who is this song directed at specifically? That's the question. So a fire sign, according to Collins' dictionary, is any of these three astrological signs: Aries, Leo or Sagittarius, that are grouped together because of the shared attributes of enthusiasm, vitality and interest in spiritual things. Dave Sabo is Virgo, Scotty Hill is a Gemini, Robbo Fuso is Pisces, but Sebastian and Rachel are both Aries. Maybe in a roundabout way this song is about their friendship falling apart, which given the history of the band is certainly in the realm of possibilities, right? Up next is Bonehead. Bonehead taunts the guillotine of religious belief. It feels like the pent-up frustrations of a man who doesn't like what he sees and has no time to swallow any more BS than he's already had to. I love these lyrics and I love this song and how it perfectly sets up the next, entering into Beat Yourself Blind. Yeah, Beat Yourself Blind. Is it about a man wrapped in superstition, but unlike Stevie Wonder's song, the writing isn't on the wall? His erratic behaviour, is it rooted in fear and anger? Fear of everything that's beyond his control and anger at himself for not having what it takes to retake the reins. Pour me a chemical to take away the edge. Carry out another stone as a slave. Beat yourself blind. A piece of paper that's fallen out a window has a better chance of knowing where it lands. Beat yourself blind. Is this a form of self-loathing? Eileen. When you first look at the name of this track, if you're anything like me, your brain might automatically load up Come On Eileen, that happy-go-lucky song by Dexy's Midnight Runners, but this Eileen is nothing like her. No, this Eileen's a crazy lunatic, higher for tits, mistaking the street light for the moon and talking to trees to comfort her tortured and drugged up mind. The atmosphere of this song is sombre with a sense of trepidation. There's a little tinge of fear and anxiety. What's going on? What's Eileen gonna do next? Sebastian sings the lyrics, I know what she knows. Whatever Eileen is keeping inside, it's eating away at her. When I close my eyes, I imagine a dark, greyish sky with a hint of red, with Eileen sat cross-legged in an abandoned park staring at the branches of a tree with no leaves. The whole scene for me almost looks black and white, and that's the power of what this album is about. It's nightmare fuel for the imagination that, if you allow it, makes you face things that you may have buried deep within your subconscious. Why didn't I picture colour? Why is she alone? Why can't I see what Eileen truly looks like? Why does the tree I picture not have leaves? I don't know, but could it be that I'm frozen? I guess that remains to be seen. Hehe. Remains to be seen. For me, Remains to be seen feels like the continuation of Eileen's trip, or the one that we're on. Are we still talking about Eileen, or is this Sebastian's dream-eating attempt at reaching out, but like the nature of a dream, the whole topic of everything keeps changing? It's fascinating to me. Subhuman Race. Subhuman Race really does feel like the middle of the dream or psychotic break. It's very similar in tone to Beat Yourself Blind, but with less to say. Sebastian laments the words, Jesus knows the story, he knows the position that I'm in. Your mouth drank my water, you talk to me like I'm subhuman, you treat me like I'm subhuman. We're jumping into the subhuman race. You treat me like shit, you're taking everything from me, and in turn, I'm becoming just like you. Is that what it means? Frozen. For me, Frozen seems to be about self-isolation, about how many of us tend to retreat into ourselves rather than face what's painful or difficult. I think to be frozen in this instance could mean that he's paralysed by indecision, stood in place. It's easier to stay right here in the proverbial box than face the harsh weather, the reality, at least for now. The box I keep myself in closes out my air, so I build a fire so I can sit and stare. As I stare into the fire, will the prophets change my mind? While I stare into the fire, all the colours treat me kind. Into Another. Into Another is a great song with perhaps the most to say. It's all meaning, all heart. It feels like the whole album in one song. There's a lot to unpack, same with its music video. The old man walking across a tightrope as sand pours out from the sack he's holding. The young man at the end of the rope holding it by his teeth. The young woman with her bulldog. The young man plucking feathers from a bird. The crow that bites the man's hand. The figurehead holding the candles. The golden undertones of sepia that colours the video. What does it all mean? Is the old man on the rope the guy in the three-piece suit from the song Youth Gone Wild? Is the young man forced to hold the rope the proverbial slave to the grind? Is the young woman with the dog Eileen? Are we in fact inside the twisted lore of every Skid Row song at once? What does it all mean? That's the question that keeps me coming back for more. It's a puzzle and I absolutely love it. Face Against My Soul for me is a song full of angst and frustration. How can I see tomorrow if you keep me in the dark? When will I see forever if you damn me from the start? Searching greener pastures, finding desert sands. Cycles on the treadmill, turning up empty hands. Whatever he does, whatever he tries to fix, it's never enough. It all seems pointless. You build a wall inside a wall, and there's no door. Set up to fail by who? Himself, perhaps. Medicine Jar is another hard hitter, but I found it the hardest to figure out. Is it about a man addicted to prescription drugs, losing his mind, torturing himself with his conscience? Or is it about a friend who's forced to bear witness to said person, hoovering up meds? Questions like these is where some of the replay value lies for me. It's what keeps me coming back for more. Breaking Down. For me, it's about one friend or romantic partner seeing the destruction of another and not being able to do a thing about it because that friend or partner is being shut out. What's more is that I think the other person, friend or partner, is already gone, passed away, because in the music video we see the band walking through a graveyard and singing in a church. Now this could be an attempt to link it to the video, to the movie that it was used for, The Prophecy, but I don't think so, because when you think about the lyrics, what was it you once said? That's past tense. This friend or partner is venting his frustrations and his grief. Within your need you lie alone, this empty space you call your home, as if you thought the rain could wash away the day and could heal you. If you just let me in, I wouldn't let you break down, cause I'm breaking down. As if just lying there is going to do anything. Talk to me, please. Let me help. Seeing you like this has hurt me more than you know. Just let me in. I wouldn't let you break down. Again, this is mental health. It's a very cleverly put together song that I feel delves deeper into the story and lore of the hit ballad off the first album, I Remember You. In fact, I'd be bold enough to say that this could be a prequel to I Remember You, especially when I examine the lyrics together. In I Remember You, he says, we woke up to the soothing sound of pouring rain, washed away a dream of you. In Breaking Down, he says, as if you thought the rain could wash away the day and could heal you. If I'm correct, then I Remember You is an extremely sad song. Heartbreak is one thing, but it's something we all recover from when given enough time. Grief, however, is something a little different. Grief is a lot harder to pull yourself out of, isn't it? In the I Remember You video, we bear witness to a homeless man carrying around this woman's picture and looking back at better times. If you watch these two videos in reverse order, I think you'll see what I mean. I Remember You feels like the escape from reality. It's the technicolor, sugar-coated version of what's happened, and maybe it's years after everything has gone down. Breaking Down, though, it's the cold, harsh reality. It's the raw, open wound. John Haycox has lost the love of his life, such to the point that he has in fact broken down. He's homeless and has been for some time. He walks the streets, trapped inside his own head. In his needs, he lies alone. The empty space he calls his home, that's his memories. That's the street. So as I explained in my Decline of Skid Row series, Skid Row had turned down the opportunity to have their song Monkey Business appear in the mega blockbuster Terminator 2. But Breaking Down did appear in the Christopher Walken's film The Prophecy. So this time I decided to sit down and watch The Prophecy, and you know what? It bored the whole off me. Honestly, I don't know what I was expecting, but it just didn't do it for me. But it is in line with alternative culture, I guess. I'm sure back in the day, you'd probably find it next to a copy of The Crow or The Craft in the video shop. The Prophecy, in a nutshell, is a thriller/horror film about an archangel that comes to Earth in search of an evil soul and a police officer who's had visions of an apocalyptic war between angels who gets caught in the middle of this said war, or some bollocks like that. Yeah, unless you have the patience, it's a little hard to follow. The Prophecy, shockingly enough, spawned a number of sequels, but I feel it's been lost to time. Finally, we get to Iron Will. With Iron Will, the album finishes as strong as it started. With Iron Will, similar in tone to My Enemy, it's got excellent tonality and totality. It's aggressive, it's real, and it's in your face. Now, I could be wrong about all of these songs. They may very well have nothing to do with anything, but if I am in fact wrong, please don't burst my bubble. I don't want to know. Allow me to continue believing that this album is special because it's special to me. Allow me to believe that it's more than the sum of its parts. This is just my interpretation of these songs, but nevertheless, I do believe Skid Row armed themselves with the best sound they could have had for that moment in time, because the mid-90s, it just hit different, and despite having a new, more modern sound, Skid Row were about to get a reality check. Now, a lot of people speculate that it was grunge that killed off Skid Row's arena status in the West, but I think a lot of people forget that Skid Row actually survived that period with the success of their #1 charting album, Slave to the Grind, and all the touring that went along with that. Up until the mid-90s, popularity-wise, Skid Row were actually in a decent spot. I think the real nail in the coffin started in 1995. MTV had begun the process of changing the guard. You see, a systematic and quite successful phase-out of the brand of rock that Skid Row was originally associated with started to take place. That very year, Headbangers Ball America gets cancelled and goes off the air, clearing the way for the sharp rise in popularity of boy bands, girl groups, hip-hop and alternative music. Headbangers Ball UK hung in there for an extra 2 years but ultimately disappeared by 97. This left no real medium for bands like Skid Row or their contemporaries. The internet wasn't the powerhouse it is today either. It wasn't as if people could go on YouTube and see Skid Row's latest release, so when Headbangers Ball went, so did Skid Row. Pop, hip-hop and rave was in. Rock was decidedly out. Over my neck of the woods, all I remember anyone talking about was Boyzone or Take That, Blur or Oasis, Mr. Vain, 2 Unlimited, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Will Smith, Pulp. I didn't see any artist that I would consider metal or rock and roll or glam on UK MTV at that time. Not until the new metal era anyway. 95, 96 and 97, these just happened to be another pivotal shift in music and popular culture. Hair metal was gone, grunge was becoming a distant memory, the 64-bit era of video gaming was beginning. Movies like Batman Forever, Clueless, The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, GoldenEye, Apollo 13, this is what had us hooked. We ate it up. Our heads were simply in a different place. Children, teenagers and adults alike, we lived for the weekend. Friday night Extravision, Saturday morning cartoons, afternoon cinema, Saturday night raves, pubs, lager, getting knocked down to get back up again. We just wanted to forget the real world, school, teachers, work, bosses, and these were the things we saw comfort in. Boy bands and girl groups were like this strange evolution of hair metal. The industry, they took the formula of 5 guys with a power ballad and good looks, took away the instruments and long hair and gave them bowl cuts. Rave was like that era's lo-fi. It was the ultimate switch off, and it was more palatable for the general public who sought their meaning not in the lyrics but in the beat of the music itself. Add a heap of drugs and you had yourself the ultimate switch off, the ultimate escape. It was relatively new and fresh. It was a revolution for some, but for others it was nightmare fuel. And for those people what was left was your alternative music. And this is where Skid Row attempted to fit in. It's important to note that Skid Row were still appearing on TV every so often, but not in the same frequency as their heydays. I read somewhere that there were rumours that MTV believed metal to be a dying genre and wanted the network to focus on more alternative rock and hip hop, which certainly seems to be the case. Guns N' Roses were gone, Iron Maiden didn't have Bruce. From 97 onwards, the music I remember being played was, to put it nicely, wildly different. So with all that was going on at the time, how exactly was a band like Skid Row supposed to compete in a market like this, especially when MTV was taking away the very show that championed them in the first place? Even though Skid Row had a new sound, it didn't matter to the bigwigs in MTV who had forever labelled them a hair metal band. However, Skid Row during this time were still very much a big in Japan band and were successfully breaking the Southeast Asia market. But unfortunately in America, they were headlining arenas to disastrous turnouts and half-empty halls. According to Setlist.fm, the Subhuman Beings on tour lasted 2 years, with the majority of shows taking place in 95. They played 113 shows in 95 and 4 shows in 96. There are some really great live shows and TV appearances, and most of them seem to lay at the beginning of the tour. I mentioned this one in my Decline of Skid Row series, but this appearance on Sound Effects TV fascinated me. It still does, because it was such a sign of the times. The video opens with Sebastian and his wife playing Donkey Kong Country on a Super Nintendo in the background, whilst the presenter is advertising a Mortal Kombat dance soundtrack and telling you that you can email the show. It was all things new and fresh, with Skid Row and 80s band slap bang in the middle of it all. The technology, communication and music, the transition of all things popular culture is all here, but the real gem is Skid Row's performance of Into Another. There's no playback, no backing tracks, no bullshit applause sign for the audience. It was plug in and go, baby. This was a proving ground. What I love most about this performance is that the band just doesn't perform the song, they feel it. There's an aura, there's an energy about this performance, and it's radiating, and you can literally see it resonating with the audience. Sebastian's vocals are on point, the floaty bravado, the tame yet ferocious roars. His expressions, it's something different, but it's also something very special. Frozen live on MTV, this was another performance that wowed me. The Japan Uriah Suit gig, Castle Donington 95, those were also an absolute joy to watch. But as much as there were great gigs, there were also a lot of shit ones as well. I'm sure in the moment, if you were at one of these shows, it was probably everything and more for you, but through the lens of what's available to me on YouTube, watching from my sofa, man, I just don't have the luxury of the proverbial rose-coloured glasses. The footage doesn't lie. The 96 performances in particular, the Brazil shows, were the worst. Sebastian's voice sounded like dog shit. All that roaring instead of singing with clarity sounds like it really took its toll on him. Add to that, the relationship between himself and the rest of the group wasn't so great either. The chemistry wasn't great at times, and you can visibly see the hostility and awkwardness slipping through the cracks in some of the footage. Monsters of Rock Brazil in particular was disastrous for Skid Row. The band found themselves on the bill with super heavy bands, and the crowd hated them right from the get-go, because to that crowd, Skid Row represented a poser genre. These are trash metalheads. You add to this a disastrous performance, and there you have it, the literal end of the band. Although Subhuman Race's sales were nowhere near Slave to the Grinds, Subhuman Race ended up having varying degrees of chart success around the world. But this is where Skid Row for most of the fan base ends. Sebastian was dismissed, and the band themselves will continue on. Skid Row is still an active band to this day, and Sebastian Bach is still an active artist, so I encourage you to check out their new material. As I reach the other end of this documentary, after living and breathing this album, after watching countless hours of live footage and interviews, and once again listening to Sebastian's book, I finally get it. I relate to this album, I relate to the headspace the guys were in, and I better understand these songs. And having both lived through and looked back on it, I also better understand this time period. I now have the intellect to comprehend this album. I didn't in my early 20s. It's important to note that Skid Row and Sebastian don't like this album, but I do. I think it's a great piece of art, and despite how hard this album hits, it can also be a strangely therapeutic and relaxing experience. Quite often there have been times where I've fallen asleep to it or used it as a form of white noise to relax. It's strange that such an album can serve as both something intense and meaningful, and yet be something that can put me at ease. And as I've shown you, it's full of little Easter eggs and relatable lyrics. Bottom line, Subhuman Race has a lot to offer, far more than what it appears. If you brushed it off for the same reasons I did when I was young, then I invite you to give it another chance. So what are you waiting for? Go get yourself a copy, get yourself comfortable, crack open a beer and give it a spin. This has been End of the Row, a deeper look at the Subhuman Race era by Richie Kearns Productions. Thank you very much for watching.